In this episode of Stop, Look, and Listen, we catch up with world-renowned artist Jonathan Green. We discuss growing up in Beaufort, his creative process, the importance of funding arts, and more.
You know, I was born by a people that had Muslim roots, because most of the Gullah Geechee people were Muslims. So as generation after generation, there's only so much information that people will retain unless there is some visual festivals, spectacle going on. And for many of the reasons, we just don't retain very much of that. One is out of still a form of oppression. You know, when we, as people of color, it seems that when we show too much of our Africanism, it's uncomfortable for other people. So when I was born, my grandmother knew in her heart of hearts that I was someone special. That's how I was treated from the day I was born. I was not allowed to play with a lot of kids. So most people would say I lived a very lonely life. No, I lived mostly a lone life, but certainly not a lonely one. And I was allowed to play and be with my first, second cousins, that's maybe third, because the older people believe that if a child is born with the veiled placenta membrane, which I was born with, it is a special gift, omen from the gods to bring some form of wealth or notoriety to a family. So this is something that's very, very important. And it's not something that's explained to a lot of people. It happens because they know it happens. And when the veil, the placenta membrane, is left on the face of the child, that is a child that has been born, that will live between life and death, so to speak, which means a brave person, I think, a person that stands up for its rights and virtues. I think that's basically what it meant. But if it's not removed immediately, the child will suffocate and die. And so that's the importance of the elders, grandparents, wisdom in the community. You take that out of the community, you don't protect that. And when I say take it out of the community, I mean when you leave elders alone and you don't participate in their needs, and therefore they're not going to share. They can't share with you their knowledge that's been passed on for generations. So there I was, a kid with, and they also nicknamed me the pen child, because they had to put a little pen around me, or I would reach in the stove or the fireplace, get something to mark on the walls or on the floors. And I guess a part of that, I probably had some AD, whatever they call that, you know, some attention deficit issue going on, all kinds of things happening. But my world never ended from the time I could remember seeing something. It's always been moving. It's always been add with a big dose of ceremonial pageantry out of anything. You know, as children, you got to be very creative. So I had an imagination, and other kids wanted to be around me, but they just couldn't be around me. In school, I spent most of my time pretty much alone. I mean, I enjoyed looking out at the landscape and the clouds and the trees and seeing people from afar. I always prefer things from afar. And I think that's because I'm studying it or them. It has nothing to do with likes or dislikes. It's just, you know, it's just something that I've done all my life. My grandmother has always prided me as a person. She had a nightclub, and she was a big shot in the church, a missionary in the church. And everywhere she went, she would take me, because I didn't talk a lot, because I didn't need to be around other kids. And I just loved listening to elders and what they had to say. And visually, for me as a child back then, the fashion of the late 40s and the 50s, I mean, it was just fabulous with colors and prints and patterns. And being between the nightclub world and the church world, I got to see a lot of fabric. That's all I saw, actually, was fabric. And I think that adds to a level of internal beauty, you know, in a person. When you have actually seen things and you can express how you feel about it, even if you're expressing how you feel about it to an imaginary person, which I have done all the time. a lot of time, it still leaves this joy within you. And for myself, having grown up in the Low Country, I've been a usher ever since I was 11 years old. I still go to the Hustle Baptist Church every first Sunday. My mother is an ordained minister. I come from families of ministers and teachers and beauticians, and because in the Black community, we were a self-sufficient community when I was a kid back in the 50s and 60s. And so as a child, I never felt a need for anything, even though there were lots of hostilities going on. Somehow, when you have a contained Black community of people that know each other and worship together, somehow those people are not as much harmed or have to deal with as much of the atrocities. We were all independent people. I mean, we're farmers, fishermen, everyone seemingly a family had a trade and we would barter. So we didn't have a big need for money all the time. I was very gifted in school with art. Well, before there were art courses, my first art course was in the 5th grade. But there were craft classes, and the teachers would always pick me out to design things. So I had a full-time job in school. And then I started making money because I would draw the science and the industrial art projects for students that just couldn't quite do it. So I would charge them and I would make money. I also made money as a farmer. I was given a Duroc hog in the 9th grade. I was a member of FHA, Future Farmers of America, FFA. And so that gave me a sense of independence. It gave me a sense of pride for what I could do on the land. My grandfather didn't always agree with my making a self-feeder for a hog. When they would give the hog slop and other things, I gave the hog corn and wheat and all that kind of stuff. And,
so which one was your first love, farming or arts?
Definitely the arts. I mean, I didn't know. I mean, you learn about farming when you're like 5 years old, maybe, but I was doing art before I could walk. And I had the elder cousins to tell you, I used to scoot and crawl, draw. So it's been art for a long time, but also a personality. I mean, it really, I have found that whatever you want to express externally, you better feel it internally. So if you don't feel good about yourself, you can't feel good about much of what else you do. It all has to work. And for me, I've always been a lover of people. I've gotten along extremely well with people over the years. And I listened to a lot of the elders, and they would say things like, don't burn bridges. And it took me a while to, what do you mean, don't burn bridges? But I realized that that's one of the most valuable lessons you can learn. If you can avoid burning, you are good. You don't have a sour reputation. And when you can eliminate as much of the negative, then you have so much more room for the positive.
Right.
As an artist, I've always been able to eliminate the negative of what people thought of an artist, or what the difficulties of some artists, the history, the corruption of how artists are treated by some galleries and some people. I've always kind of avoided that because I knew that it wasn't going to help me. It's one thing to learn something and just to kind of store it away. It's another thing to fester over it. So I never fester on anything. I wake up every day with just a tremendous joy in my heart just to be living. You start with, oh, I can move my arms, so I'm good. What else can I do? I'm good. That's why I live every day. So it's a routine for me every day. And art is just like the air I breathe. I can't really separate. I mean, I've been doing it for 42 years professionally without having any other jobs, without having to use my minor in education. And I have weathered some good storms, some of the market crashes for artists. I mean, that's like dire for artists whenever the market starts fluctuating, because if the market.
How is it now? How is it now with the pandemic?
Because I'm an older artist and I've had a uh, uh, and for the most part, an unblemished career,
Mm-hmm.
I'm good because people know who I am. They know that my work is standing the test of time. The value has never depreciated in my work. And I
Right.
give a lot of charity in the form of teaching people how to fish. So I do that with lots of the communities all the time. In college at the Art Institute of Chicago in the 70s, I went to that school with a mission. And my mission was to absorb everything I could possibly absorb from that school and take it with me. I didn't go there for any other reason than that. And my purpose was that so many of my elders believed in me and what I was going to do. Now, they didn't know I was going to become a professional artist necessarily, but they knew that whatever I wanted to do, it wasn't if I applied myself, whatever I wanted to do, I was going to do it and do it very well. Now, regardless if that's true, but when people say these things to you over and over and over again, that's why elders are so important to young people. Parents don't have time to be as loving and doting and sharing with them information of their culture, of their family, their history. And so for an artist coming out of this environment, from my grandmother that was so protective of me, and my grandfather was protective of me, and of course, the more people they told about me, the more protection I had. I came from just a beautifully cushioned nest, and that allowed me to take on any situation, um, accept and apply for anything that an artist would do. I never regarded myself as a Black artist. Well, I know that. I mean, I know that when I look in the mirror. So I never operate from the perspective of being a Black artist. I operate from the perspective of being as best of an artist as I can be with my talent and what I have learned and what I hope to learn in the future.
So, could you speak on the importance of arts in schools, especially within like the Black communities? Because there's so many schools that are they're not able to finance having arts in schools nowadays.
I mean, this is very emotional for me because there should never, ever be a school without a full arts program. Who's going to paint, draw, sculpt you? Who's going to do it? Who's going to dance our stories, festivals? Who's going to decorate our stages for performances? I mean, how can there be a school without a full arts department? The second part, I don't believe in the government paying for it. I believe that the art departments in these schools should be financed by the community. Because if it's financed by the community, it will always be there.
Mm-hmm.
And the art department in a school, if it's financed by the community, then that's the community's history. Those kids are painting about themselves, about their family, doing art around themselves, their family. And then that's when you have a constructive community. But if you don't take the arts, and we of all people coming out of Africa, where the continent of Africa was around arts, cultural arts, performances, dance. I mean, we kind of got the music, and then sometimes we get stagnant with the music too, because we don't have enough people that have those other elements in the arts, and the only people that most often that we can work with are people that are not knowledgeable about our culture, our experiences at all. So without the arts department in schools, without art departments in any school, the community becomes a ghetto. And I don't mean necessarily a ghetto by shabby houses either. I mean just a ghetto, a mental ghetto.
Nice. So let's go back to just your experiences harnessing your skills, like at the Art Institute of Chicago, and then in the military as well. How did those worldly experiences help bring home your creativity to where you celebrate Gullah culture and your upbringing?
The military for me allowed me an opportunity to travel, I thought. I didn't go to many exciting places. I went to North Dakota and Texas and, not really, really exciting places. But what I did in those places, because the weather conditioning was just so, Texas was so hot and dry. North Dakota was just freezing. So I had an opportunity to just sort of really think about what I wanted to do after military. I was doing illustration work in military. I was doing chef work in military because I love cooking. So I thought, well, maybe I'll just become a chef. Well, it was, I guess I enjoyed meeting the people more than anything. When you're in a child hall, people coming through and just seeing all those different people kept me from being homesick a lot. So in the military, I took on a job as an illustrator, and I did that for a while. And that's mostly just illustrating military or drawing military. And I worked in an engraving deal for a while. And but what the military did was it afforded me the opportunity to go to any school I wanted to in the United States of America. And that was really my interest in the military. And then after the military, I went to a vocational school for a year in Grand Forks, East Grand Forks, Minnesota, right across the border. And I studied textile design and did very well there, so well that they then insisted that I go to the Art Institute of Chicago. And I knew nothing about the Art Institute of Chicago. I'd never heard about this place. And but by the time I did my research, I thought, oh yeah, this is the city to be in. And so arriving in Chicago in the middle 70s was, when you're used to cities like New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, you've never been out west, and all of a sudden you're in this metropolis. And I learned about the history of Chicago, and people that came to Chicago were people from Georgia and Louisiana and parts of Texas. And you had all these little communities on the south and west sides of Chicago. And then it had the WPA culture. It had the Southside Community Arts Center. It had the Carter G. Woodson Library. It had the Sabo Museum. So these are all extensions outside of the Art Institute of Chicago. The Art Institute of Chicago for me was just a very easy fit. I loved it so much I took on a job as a security guard because I wanted to be around the paintings and see the paintings. I didn't socialize with people very much at the Art Institute of Chicago. I was the vice president of the multicultural organization group for non-white students that need to get together, do whatever. So I did that only for a year because I felt that there really wasn't a need for that program anymore. It was a need for it like back in the 60s. Maybe 70s, but certainly not now. What's important is that we disperse ourselves everywhere amongst every people. Just because you're black or brown or yellow or even white, you shouldn't want to just be around other people that look like you. I mean, you're not learning anything. So I was always out mixing with other people and learning about their culture. And all of that, I think, helps to shape the art, because what's most important is you have to imagine a story to tell a story. And in order to paint a story, you have to have those two things going for you. So I have an endless imagination of imagery. I never, ever have to look at anything. And I seldom look at anything. When I'm in my studio, I don't have necessarily drawings or photographs or anything like that to work from. I would rather take the chance of someone looking at my painting and saying, I really like that painting, and he did a pretty good job, rather than looking at a painting and say, oh, that looks like a photograph.
So here's an example of one.
Yes. You are exactly right. That's a perfect example.
Tell me about it.
Telling the story is like, we forget the Silicon Valley of farming for us as a people. I mean, you can never, ever survive without farming. And so many of us have forgotten that. And I remember going to my first grocery store. I think it was a Piggly Wiggly in Beaufort when I was 12 years old. Kind of freaked me out when I went to the part where they had the chicken and fish and the hands and the feet where the tails were all chopped off. I mean, you know what it was. I remember saying to my grandmother, are we going to eat that? I don't know where that came from. And I've always been that way. So for me, all of my paintings are about, especially paintings that I started painting more seriously, probably in the early 80s. And these are paintings that are like surrounded from my childhood, the color series. I've always painted in series. So, because it takes several chapters to tell a story, right? So for the past 42 years, I've painted paintings in series from 10 to 30, maybe 40 paintings. And each of those series tells a story. It could be about farming, it could be about fishing, it could be about my grandfather's moonshine still, my grandmother's nightclub. And most 98% of the people in any given place have not seen my originals.
Okay.
Because the originals are sold immediately. And I mean, so my collectors, when they know I'm working on a series, they'll just call it, well, they'll ask what series I'm working on, and they'll just say, well, I'll take one of those. So by the time I'm finished the series, it's gone. And I've been working until very recently, I've been working on an average of doing 3 continuous series of paintings.
So you were just referring to your creative process. How do you navigate having a creative block?
I've never had one.
Never. In 42 years? Never? How many pieces have you done?
5 years.
How many pieces have you done overall?
Richard, my studio manager and partner for 42 years, says I've done well over 3,000.
Wow. And never had a creative block.
Oh, 3,000 sold.
Okay. Nice. That's amazing. I mean, we do radio shows, and I create most of the content as far as the show topics. And I sort of use a similar process where I work on about 40 to 50 show topics at a time, covering a wide range, but I let life materialize. And if something inspires me, then that's when I focus on that giving show topic. So I understand your process.
It's never ending.
Never ending. Life continues to evolve, and you find something that inspires you.
You always have something. And sometimes you have a lot to share. And I'm always sharing with people. We developed this Low Country Rice Culture Project for
I was just about to ask you about
that. You're psychic.
So tell me about it and the prominent role rice plays in our history.
Well, the only reason for the transmigration of West Africans in numerous numbers, well, they were here before they were enslaved, but in terms of mostly the enslaved West Africans, it was for the purpose of rice. Agriculture was our Silicon Valley of then. And when the Portuguese sailed down the coast of West Africa and saw hundreds of miles of golden fields they thought it was wheat. They realized it was rice. The shimmering in the wind, you can imagine how beautiful that must have been. So I believe still to this day, even with all the research I've done, that West Africans were here, free farmers first. Then came the enslaved numbers of people. Charleston, 1690, say around 1700 to about, I would bet rice created the wealth and aristocracy of Charleston, and it was maintained for over 200 years. Charleston was the wealthiest city in America for over 100 years, and arguably one of the wealthiest cities in the world for over 100 years. That's enormous. And much of that happened because of rice culture. Well, certainly all of it happened because of West African bodies and ingenuity. So we do not have any of this information in our school system. And our kids are so mentally just dilapidated because we don't know our history. And when you look like us, there has to be a history. So what's the history? So that they can see their own beauty. That's why I paint what I paint. I paint so that people can see their own beauty in the low country. They don't need a fancy building next to them. They don't need a fancy car. All they need is the landscape, just the beauty of the landscape. And that relates back to how we are seen so often as very healthy people until very recently. It was because of our knowledge, our communal family relationships, believing and trusting in each other. And we didn't have so much of the arts, but we did have craft, you know, sweetgrass baskets, pottery, making quilts, making clothing. I come from a line of seamstresses that one of my ancestors was the major seamstress for Beaufort, all of those fancy gowns for the wealthy people. So we have all of these interior knowledges. And I do know that the enslaved West Africans in Charleston and city areas have far more opportunities and advantages than those that live in, you know, further out, like in the Midlands and areas like that. Because they have, just with it being an international city also, you know, they have all that different exposures. Now, granted, they didn't want any Africans in here during that time because they didn't want the Africans to entice the enslaved people to act up. Well, of course it did happen. But the reason why European history is so memorable and entertaining and all of that is because they have drawn it. They have illustrated it. That's what we see. So where is ours? Every historical Black college should be a major depository for teachers, training teachers to train our young Black kids. You cannot have young white girls training young Black kids. That's almost sacrilegious. Not their fault, but our kids need to see people that look like them. There's nothing wrong with seeing some white people, but not a whole school filled with white teachers for Black kids. That's total madness.
Right.
That change.
I went to high school. I went to high school at Battery Creek, in Beaufort, South Carolina. Also your hometown. And
Okay.
so I'm thinking back. I know I had Black African American female teachers, but I had only one African American male teacher, and his name was Mr. Hayward, and he taught African American history.
Yes.
And that was it. Then I went off to college, Winthrop University, and I had one male professor, Dr. Adolphus Belk. He was a poli-sci professor. I didn't get him until my final year at Winthrop. So I can definitely relate. Like having, you know, people that look like us in the classroom is vital to our growth, and having someone that we can relate to. And without it, I feel like we're missing the boat.
We are misguided, definitely. And in order for, I've traveled the world. I've traveled as ambassador of the arts for the state of Florida. I'm ambassador of the arts here. We are mounting Vibrant Vision collection of our private collection that's going to be at the Gibbs Museum, which has a showcase of artists from the WPA period, and it's African diaspora. They're from different parts of the Caribbean, Africa, and rarely do you see a show that is as complete in our Africanness. You know, talking about our coming from different parts of the world. And I know that we don't see that. Our kids don't see it in schools. I have a poster collection of my work that I put together to have travel around places, and but we just don't see enough art. We just don't. I think we need to put the book down, that Bible. Just close it for a minute. And just think, if it wasn't for the pictures in these big, beautiful Bibles, many of us historically would not understand the story, because 90% of the population of any people were illiterate. They couldn't read when the Bible was printed. That's why they printed pictures in the Bible. So those pictures would tell, someone can talk about the story and point to the picture, and you're going to remember that. But how much are you going to remember someone just talking to you from scripture and there are no images? I mean, what's the point of remembering it?
Right.
Where's the
So, as Beaufortonians, like, we're flashy and colorful, whether that's me having like a green wall behind me with your art or dressing in bright colors. How did that template inspire you as far as just the vivid imagination of using these bright colors that just burst off the page?
I do not paint from studying colors when I'm painting.
Really?
Study the colors. I really paint with my mind more so than my eyes.
Uh-huh.
I use my eyes as a sort of research or notes. But then after I've seen it with my eyes, then it enters my soul, my heart, and I feel it.
Mm-hmm.
So many of my paintings are really of the emotion of feeling, touching.
Nice.
Seeing isn't always as memorable, but like the picture behind you. I mean, so many people can look at that once and never see it again, and can say, I had a lighter colored girlfriend or a darker colored girlfriend, or, oh, I remember that dress, but they don't have to look at it anymore. And they can just tell endless stories, not because they are constantly thinking and looking at the painting, it's because the painting has allowed them to have an imagination.
Wow. So when you started to explode with the popularity, did your family and friends, did they support you, or were they the last ones to jump on the bandwagon?
The train has left.
I can relate. I can relate totally. It always seems like with our content, we receive love globally, and then there's people that I'm related to or dating or like friends with for over 20 years, and they don't, give us the time of day. So that's always been kind of confusing to me.
Well, I think a part of the confusion is that when we're growing up, we're all into our separate heads, trying to figure out how to make sense of this life and what we're going to do in it. And most of us want to get away, go somewhere else to see, be different for a time. And we just lose track of each other. And so when we don't have places in our communities other than churches where we could come back and meet and be together, like we don't have festivals, we don't have, different types of sport games. I mean, they might be playing basketball or maybe football or something like that, but they're not. It is not really celebrated in the work that the community has done to keep this going on for generations. Mm-hmm. There's no visual element to it. So you go to a game and people just dress like they just kind of walked out of the house. There's no concerted effort of togetherness, solidarity in our visual presentation, the way it can be, the way it should be. It's not there. And again, when you don't have the arts as a part of your community, the arts handles a huge part of that. The arts handles the expression of dress, behavior, cuisine, music, dance. So if you have a community without the arts, then you're missing those 5 things. And how can you do anything but just gather in t-shirts and do whatever?
Mm-hmm. Stand on the corner. So, like for future artists, could you like go into like the process and I'm sure in some cases the struggle of getting your work um, in galleries around the world? Like,
Well,
oh, go ahead.
no, please finish.
No, I was saying, so is it pretty much, do they approach you and say, I love, you know, this piece and we would like to have it in in our gallery, or are you the one initiating the communication?
They're always coming up to me asking me to be a part of their gallery. I mean, most galleries would just love to have me because they know that with me, they get a full show. It's not just my handing my work over, it's that I'm going to bring collectors in there. I'm going to make the place known for the time my work is there and even after my work is gone. But I have sold for so many years to private people, and they know who I am, and they know where I come, and it's just much easier for me. And also, I mean, I don't see why I should give a gallery 50%. I mean, why should I have a name? You know, I've been around longer than most galleries, and my work is still selling, it's still current. And I'm still producing many more images. But I would say for the young artist, and also in relationship to me and young artists, I never approach young artists from the perspective of, do you want to work with me or anything like that. And I don't for the reason that, again, going back to older people, if you're going to come to me, then I don't have to deal with any issues or obstacles that you might have or you may bring forth. If you come to me, the first thing I will say to you is that you have to be better than I am. And why shouldn't you be? You have to really be committed. Uh, I'm not going to be calling you and asking you what you're doing, or, I mean, I will, if you're working, I will find collectors for you. Richard and I help artists, young artists, get as independent as quickly as possible so they can then go out and do their thing. The most important part of me, I think, as an artist is my work ethics. I'm a workaholic. I would rather be alone and work than to be out socializing and doing all those things because I have to do it at openings and at events and all of that stuff. I love being at home and I love being in my studio, and I don't ever have to go anywhere unless I'm asked.
So tell us about what you're doing now. Tell us about the studio. From what I was seeing on the website, I noticed that you have a couple other artists, their works is in the studio as well.
Yes.
What's your process, your selection process?
They have to make me really want to be around them. That's my selection. That's how it happens. Because I'm moving 24/24. You know, I'm not a maternal figure, so I'm not the one to pat you on the back and say you're doing good. No, I'm not that kind of person. My thing is, you said you wanted to be an artist, which means you have to be committed to being an artist. And if you're committed to being an artist and you have access to me and you can piggyback on what I'm doing, then you should be running with that. What else more do I need to do? Do I need to tell you to work? Do I need to tell you to pay attention to what I'm doing? Do I need to tell you when I'm going to an exhibition? No, you should know all of that through, go on the web page. You have to find that information out. I cannot sit around and tell people what's going on, what I need to do. Now, if we're sitting around having a cocktail or a coffee or something, and I'm talking about a show, that's a different story. But they have to have enough initiative to want to be around me. And if they have that initiative to want to be around me, they're going to love being around me.
All right, so just tell us about your website and what you have for sale on it, and I guess a little bit of what else you have going on.
Well, if you go onto the webpage, you will find all the items that are there, saleable items from paintings. We keep on the web page all the paintings that are available, and then we have a web page for posters, and then we have I think you're going through one web page and then have excerpts to all of those things. But we always have something going on, and I don't think mainly so much about getting out there selling, because you know, the sales come here and I don't have to leave the studio, which is a wonderful thing. By the time Richard has screened someone over the phone, they definitely want to buy, because we just don't, you know, we just don't allow people to come in and look. I mean, that takes up at least 1 to 2 hours every time someone comes in the studio. So I can't, and my studio in my home is all in one, and which is the way I love it. It's like a penthouse, you know, one side is the studio, another side is the house.
Right.
And but if someone is serious about the work after they have, especially know the cost of the work, that's very important. I don't want someone coming in and not knowing the cost, and when they hear it, it's just shocking to them. Now, I wouldn't want that experience for them around my work. So we make sure that they have all the information they need before they come here. And then if they come here, they're coming here to buy something. And then that way they have my undivided attention.
Right. And the studio is based in Charleston, South Carolina?
The studio is based on the peninsula.
Okay.
That's where the studio is. And all the many of the posters and calendars, that's at the marketplace at Chuma's.
Okay.
That's a market in Queen Street. So if anybody wants calendars, posters, or reproductions, that's where they go.
Right.
They want Jonathan Green originals, then they contact Richard Weedman. They can go on Jonathan Green at jonathangreenstudios.com, or they can call him at 410-843-410-1363.
Good. Nice.
Thank you. And also remember the upcoming show at the Gibbs Museum, which is a vibrant vision collection. It's going to have a fabulous historical and educational component designed to educate people around these artists, where they lived, and then they get to see the images themselves. And that's going to be there from August 22nd through January 10th, I think.
Well, Jonathan, it was a pleasure. I have to tell you, growing up in Beaufort, St. Helena Island, to be specific, there was never a moment where I would go to a relative's house and they didn't have your piece of work, whether it was a piece of art, a calendar, or even just going to Penn Center. I mean, because you know, you're celebrated at Penn Center like none other. Even though I live 6 hours away currently, your creations make me feel like I'm always home.
Well, I so appreciate that, LaToy. You know, that's why the calendars are so important. And those calendars have been produced for over 25 years. I mean, what calendar do you know of that's been in production for 25 years of our imagery of us? I mean, that's what, I mean, Tide Mark, those people are just, and you know where that calendar started? It started out of Penn Center by Mrs. June Fogg, who was on the board of Penn Center. And she had a connection with the calendar company, Tide Mark. And we did it as a fundraiser for Penn. And then from Penn, then we started doing it as a fundraising arm for other organizations. All the things that I have done my entire career, I've always helped tremendously in a fundraising capacity, teaching people to fish. Right. And the posters have done that. I think we have about at least 80 images of posters that we have allowed organizations to use as fundraising. So that's, I mean, I've given millions back because of the posters and the calendar. And it's a wonderful and much easier thing for me to do rather than giving money. There you go. Because we don't always have the cash, but we have the residuals of cash. And I learned from Dr. David Driscoll a long time ago. He said, Jonathan, always try and have some form of reproduction because that keeps your work alive. So if you can imagine, if I didn't have the calendar or the posters, very few people would ever get to see my work.
Right.
So because of that, we all have an opportunity to look at it. Now, I wanted to ask you a quick question.
Go ahead.
Are you related to Roland?
No,
Gardner?
I'm actually a Days.
Oh, you look like a Days. That's why I was.
So I'm not sure if you know oldest Days Senior. That's my grandfather.
Are you related to Ron Days?
Distant.
Distant.
cousin.
Okay.
So I'm from Scott
Where is Scott?
in St. Helena.
Oh,
Scott Hill. If you've heard of Scott Hill Farms.
Oh, yes, I have. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I was born on that same street, basically on the other end of that road.
Okay.
But we would walk over to Scott Hill Farms and pick strawberries all the time.
Oh my goodness, my great grandmother on my father's side is from St. Helena.
Mm-hmm.
I think her maiden name would have been Higgins.
Okay. And I know a lot of people, you know, in the Gardens Corner, Dale, Seabrook area too, like the Antleys.
Well, Antleys are related through marriage.
Uh-huh.
Who do you
And
know in Gardens Corner?
Jermaine Antley, we went to school together. We're like,
okay. That's my
we're
nephew.
good friends. Oh,
He's
he
my
is?
nephew. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'll tell him when we get off the interview. I'm going to text him and
Yeah,
tell him
I think now. How old is he? He's about what?
He's 40. He's 40.
Yeah, Jermaine. I think that his father is Clyde Green, and Clyde Green was my brother. He's passed. But yeah, so that's Labico.
Yep. LBC.
Now,
that's the way he refers to it. LBC.
Okay. Got it. Well, this has been a wonderful interview.
I thank you. I thank you
I'll
so
always
much.
remember you, LaTroy, because you have given me the wings to fly.
And I'll contact you, probably text or email, and let you know when we're gonna run it. And
okay, text
and
me.
and I'll send you the link to it so you can have it. You can put it on your website if you would like. You know.
Okay, I will, absolutely. I know Dr. Long would love to do that because she is at the Gibbs Museum. She is a scholar in residence for community and audio digital learning.
Right.
So a very important position for her. And so I told her I was doing that. She says, well, you know, are you going to be okay doing it? I said, well, you know, I mean, I got to do it by myself sooner or later. So.
Well, I kind of see these as oral history projects. So
absolutely. Are you familiar with the history makers? Look up history makers.
Uh-huh.
And what you're doing is what they're doing, and it is so important. And you need to think of where you're going to deposit.
Right. I work in libraries. So
yeah. So you know,
But so I work at UNC Chapel Hill. So they have the Penn Center papers.
Oh, absolutely.
At the library that I used to work at on campus.
Okay, I know them. Well, you know, that was one of my big smoke issues about the Penn Center collection being up in North Carolina. And the last person I spoke with that Penn gave an award to, I said, well, I mean, how come you all still have the collection? It should be at Penn Center.
Right.
And he said, well, I said, well, then you can at least have copies of it at Penn Center. Mm-hmm. But again, it gets back to community. If the communities are not working together cooperatively, then other people will have our culture.
And then, I mean, just to stay on that soapbox, it should be somebody from the community running Penn Center, the way I feel.
Like you.
That's possible. And Victoria Smalls is amazing too.
Is she still there?
She's not.
We're talking about.
I'll let you talk to her about it. I don't want to.
Future. Well, you know what? I will tell you one thing, Troy. When the mission is clear in terms of why you're doing something, the barking dogs don't really matter. You will always have the noise in the background. But if you see and feel that the mission is important, nothing should stop you. Nothing has stopped me as an artist.
And that's inspiring.
And especially with your background and your studies, Penn Center will always need someone that's in modern times. Someone young, youthful, good looking. I mean, that's what Penn Center needs.
Right.
Dynamic, educational, informative. Bringing the outside in via literature, video, whatever. But the importance of the director of Penn is as important as anything. I can't tell you because it's the culture.
The culture is so rich, and just over the last couple of years with the Heritage Festival and how they built fences to keep the locals out. I mean, the locals were the ones that made Penn Center and the history what it is. Like, why are you putting up a fence and charging people $20 to park? I mean, money is important, but you don't want to deter the people that actually provided the foundation for it. You don't want to turn them away.
Their names are still on there and they should be a big part of it. But, that will all be worked out.
Yeah.
Hopefully. It's been a pleasure.
It has.
Look forward to meeting you in person. And,
I would love for that.
Do you know Elijah Hayward?
Yeah, that was my high school teacher that I was referring to.
Oh.
Uh-huh.
Oh, he was in North Carolina.
At Battery Creek. That was my high school teacher. So his son went to UNC Chapel Hill, and when I was working in the library one day, he walks up to the.
I'm talking about Elijah Jr. Then.
Yeah, so I met Junior. So I was working at the reference desk in Wilson Library one day, and he came in, and I was signing him in, and he was like, "My name's Elijah Hayward." So I looked at him, and I asked him, like, "Are you from Beaufort?" Because I've never bumped into anyone from Beaufort in Chapel Hill, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm from Beaufort." And I was like, "Do you know Elijah Hayward Sr.?" He was like, "My high school teacher." And he's like, "That's my dad." So we kind of, had a chuckle and a nice little conversation. And every time I would bump into him, I'd ask how his dad was doing. I'm not sure if he's still in the area or not, though.
Yeah, he is COO of the International African American Museum here in Charleston.
Oh, wow.
To which I'm a board member.
Okay.
And his father, Elijah, and I were in school together. And also Shirley Houston, I don't know if you remember, you would know that name, but she's also from the island. Yes, we all were in school together.
Nice.
The senior.
Yeah, he had a store in Ladies Island, but I'm not sure what he's doing now.
Oh, okay. Well, it'd be interesting to, one of these days I'll probably run into him. When I get down there, we haven't seen each other since high school.
Right.
And
so he might see this interview and.
Yeah, it might inspire him.
But I'll definitely have to contact Junior. Yeah, I'll definitely have to contact Junior and see if he can hook me up.
Absolutely. Well,
all right. It's been a pleasure.
Have you interviewed him?
Not yet.
Oh well. When you speak with him, you tell him that Jonathan suggests that you interview him.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll do that.
Okay.
Well, I appreciate it. I didn't even introduce you or close you out, but the conversation was, so organic, it doesn't matter. So,
well, home people don't need all that.
Nah. We're home. We're Beaufortonians, so
There you go.
that's all that matters.
Well, it was certainly a pleasure, and look forward to meeting you in the future. And also, don't forget about Spoleto next year here in Charleston, which is in May. We're bringing back Porgy and Bess.
Okay.
And that's a must-see for you, and it's a must-see for you to interview some people there. And I want you to, so when that happens, if you have some time, come down, and I will kind of show you around backstage and all kind of stuff like that.
That sounds good. That would be an amazing experience.
Okay, well, we'll make it happen.
All right.
Thank you,
Jonathan.
Sir.
It's been
Bye-bye.
a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Like it.
Hey everybody, my name is Cammie, and thank you so much for watching our YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe for more great content, and don't forget to check us out on social media at GOB Radio Network.